Good morning and welcome. On behalf of the organisers, University of St Andrews in the UK, the Merce McKinney-Muller Centre for Zero Carbon Shipping and the Global Maritime Forum, I'm pleased to welcome you to this event about the prospects of decarbonising shipping in alignment with the Paris Agreement. So a warm welcome to all our speakers and panellists today, and a thank you to the Nordic Council of Ministers for providing this platform for this discussion. My name is Catherine Palmer. I am the shipping lead at the Climate Champions team, and I will be moderating this session today. We have a number of keynote speakers, and then we will have a panel discussion. So we'll be choreographing people on and off the stage to make sure that we're not overcrowded here. So for the maritime industry to reach the climate targets of the Paris Agreement, i.e. full decarbonisation by 2050, the sector and its supply chain must be well underway by 2030, with 5% of international shipping fuels being zero carbon. Over the past few years, we have witnessed a number of zero carbon commitments across the industry, such as investment in R&D products and projects, and most recently the COSEV commitment from large retail brands committing to using 100% decarbonised maritime freight in their supply chain by 2040, as well as the momentum and support the Getting to Zero Coalition's call for action has, with over 200 signatories, calling on policymakers to create the enabling policy environment. So the objective of this event is to discuss what it will take for us as an industry to realise this commitment, as well as discuss the need for public-private collaboration in order to accelerate the transition, because now is the time to act. It is no coincidence that we are discussing sustainable shipping at the Nordic Council of Ministers Pavilion. And to give a short pitch about why Northern Europe is well positioned to be ahead of the curve when it comes to the sustainable transition of shipping, we have with us Rika Vetter Olofsson, the Deputy Director of the Danish Maritime Authority, and Brian Johnson, the CEO of the UK Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. So I would like to welcome Rika and Brian to the stage to deliver their short keynote addresses. Please welcome them. You're starting.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you very much to everybody else for inviting me here to join you. Among other things, to discuss the importance of enabling first movers. It's no secret that tackling the climate crisis has become a top priority within the last 2 and 3 years. Every sector has to contribute. This is no less true when looking at the maritime industry. As we all know, international shipping is currently responsible for 3% of global emissions. And as demand for international seaborne trade grows in line with global economic growth, emissions could increase by 2050 under a business-as-usual scenarios as much as 50%. With a view to achieving the Paris Climate Agreement, we cannot afford this business-as-usual approach. Instead, we need to set international shipping on an ambitious zero-emission trajectory. This is also why the Danish government has chosen to set ambitious national climate goals, including domestic shipping. By 2030, emissions should be reduced with 70% compared to 1990, and in 2050, Denmark should be climate neutral. However, we need to increase global ambitions and goals in order to decarbonize shipping. International shipping has a great potential to contribute to tackling the climate crisis. And therefore we need ambitious governments, taking the lead for a push for higher climate ambitions for shipping. On Monday, the 1st of November, At COP26, the Danish Prime Minister presented a declaration on zero-emission shipping by 2050 at an event together with US Special Envoy for Climate Change, John Kerry, and Minister of Health, Bruce Billiman, and Executive Vice President CEO Henriette Thyssen from AP Møller Mærsk. The declaration on zero-emission shipping by 2050 will be used beyond COP26 to widen support for raised ambitions when it comes to shipping's contribution to reaching the Paris goals. What becomes clear when discussing decarbonization of shipping industry is that public and private partnerships and close cooperation is a must. Progress cannot be achieved by one single country or no single company. One of the greatest tasks lying ahead of us will be to ensure that all actors in the value chain, from nations and fuel producers to port and terminal operators to ship owners, commit, collaborate and deliver at the same time and across sectors. Fortunately, we have great experiences with partnerships across sectors and between both public and private sector. And we can build on past experiences. For instance, over the past 4 decades, Denmark has developed a cutting-edge wind industry thanks to innovative technologies, visionary enterprises, smart regulation, and political leadership. This has made wind energy a competitive alternative to fossil energy. This would not have happened if it was not for a close collaboration between the government and the industry, as well as across sectors. And I believe we should learn from this when we put our efforts into decarbonizing international shipping. Denmark has a strong tradition for public-private partnerships, and in Denmark we have recently established 13 public-private climate partnerships representing all branches of the Danish business, from energy and heavy industry to financial sector and shipping. They have helped the government identify the way forward in terms of what needs to be done, both in public and private sector, and they have made concrete commitments on how the private sector can help achieve the goals put forward from the government. Denmark has also chosen to co-lead an international public-private partnership on zero-emission shipping together with the United States, Norway, Mærsk Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, and the Global Maritime Forum. The Zero-Emission Shipping Mission is an innovation partnership, and our goal is for ships capable of running on zero-emission fuels to make up at least 5% of the global deep-sea fleet by 2030. We will use this partnership to develop and demonstrate and deploy zero-emission fuels, ships, and fuel infrastructure together and make zero-emission ocean-going shipping the natural choice for ship owners when they renew their fleet. By 2030, we need to see at least 200 of these ships to primarily use zero-emission fuels across the main deep-sea shipping routes, and we believe this will lay the foundation for increasing numbers in the following years towards a zero-emission shipping future. To move forward with the shipping mission, we need large-scale demonstration projects and that show policymakers and the industry that zero-emission shipping is possible. Therefore, Denmark, as co-lead of the shipping mission, is very pleased that the green shipping corridors, which will be presented later on this week by the British government, is an integrated part of the mission, because establishing green corridors will help showcase that decarbonizing shipping routes is possible also in the short term. For instance, by testing and demonstrating green solutions on a shipping route between Denmark and Norway, we can take steps towards making it feasible to decarbonize some of the deep-sea shipping routes across continents. In other words, green corridors could be the tipping point for the development of the green maritime solutions that we need to meet our shipping mission goals, as well as our collective climate goals. Let me conclude my remarks here today by underlining that to tackle the climate crisis, we need all men on deck. Therefore, I'm happy to be able to participate in this year's COP, which will hopefully bring some strong commitments to the table from across the world. And I know that new important initiatives has been and will be presented during the COP26, which is great But it is very important to remember the commitments and initiatives presented these 2 weeks in Glasgow should and must be used beyond COP26, because we need to widen support for global climate ambitions for shipping and to deliver concrete results. Therefore, Denmark hopes that more countries will support our declaration on zero-emission shipping by 2050 and join our shipping mission in an effort to strengthen the shipping sector's contribution to a greener future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'd now like to introduce Brian for his keynote address.
Thank you. Hello, Brian Johnson from the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency here in the UK. And real pleasure to be working with the Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller Foundation so closely. Thank you for the opportunity today. I think we recognise in the UK that there are several strands that need to be followed to decarbonise shipping. One of those is to achieve international consensus, and the UK supports very much the 2018 IMO strategy to reduce greenhouse gases. However, we believe that the recent IPCC report is a wake-up call and really shows we've got to work harder. So, ahead of the strategy's revision, the UK will be working together with other member states to ensure that the strategy is fit for purpose to stay on a 1.5 degrees Celsius degree pathway. As part of this, we'll be championing a 2050 target of zero emissions from international shipping. We acknowledge that will be very challenging, but we believe it's technically feasible, with most mainstream alternative fuel options intended to be zero emissions without requiring offsetting. We also recognise that international consensus will take some time to achieve, so we need to do something significant in the meantime. Later in the week, we'll be launching the Clydebank Declaration, assembling a broad coalition of member states interested in green shipping corridors beyond the domestic ones. We believe those green shipping corridors will be a really vital springboard to creating some of the market interventions and incentives to make decarbonised shipping happen. We are engaging with domestic and international ports and port industry representatives. We see the port sector as being really important. I think one of the things that I hear a lot about in shipping is the talk about the ships. I think the big thing is actually the system change. The system change is gigantic even compared to the shipping change. So I think we believe focusing attention on ports and infrastructure is important as well. And we believe, given our expertise in this field, that we can add value to the regulatory domain, whether that's shipping regulatory, economic regulatory, or port regulatory. What's the UK doing domestically to support maritime decarbonisation? Well, the UK's domestic maritime industry has told us for some time that they need international regulatory platform to decarbonise, a set of rules. And we're going to push for swift and ambitious action at the IMO to deliver those. The UK published a Transport Decarbonisation Plan in 2021, which takes a holistic view across all transport modes, setting out a credible, ambitious pathway to net zero, including longer-term regulatory interventions for maritime. And those include areas like shore power, dealing with the technical and operational challenges of maritime decarbonisation. We've been running a clean maritime demonstration competition, which is a £23 million springboard programme, and helping to lay the foundation for a network of real-world projects. So we'll hear more about that tomorrow if you want to join us. The UK's net zero strategy, published in October, included a commitment to extend that clean maritime programme to multi-year programme, delivering demonstrations and technology trials. As I said earlier, I think one of the things that is strong for us in the UK is the system change that's required in shipping. For me as a regulator, that means making sure that regulation we've got is flexible enough to allow trialling and proving of new technology, and that we continue to evolve our regulation quickly so that it does not become the bottleneck for adoption of technologies in the mainstream. We're already working with a number of international partners. This is one demonstration. We've got others where we're working with other classification societies and maritime administrations to put information out in the public domain, which we hope will help the shipping sector come to conclusions about which energy solutions to use to decarbonise. We're supporting domestic industry to implement decarbonisation solutions. Good example of that is decarbonising all the support vessels for wind farms, offshore wind farms in the UK. And finally, we've got a big programme underway with our maritime training colleges, changing the way that we train seafarers so that seafarers graduating from those colleges in the coming years will be fit for A, the technological challenges, and B, some really extreme leadership challenges as a sector makes a move that we would argue is greater and faster than the move from sail to steam some 200 years ago. So I'd just like to conclude by saying how strongly we support the Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller Foundation transition strategy and its 4 legs. We feel those deliver absolutely the right tone. Thank you.
And both Brian and Rike will stay around for the remainder of this session, and so if there are any questions, they're both here to be able to answer them. I'd like to move on now to our third speaker, and they will be joining us remotely by Zoom. So our next presenter is Martin Smith. He is professor at University of St Andrews, and he will pull out some specific details with regards to the High Seas project and share his reflections on where the maritime space currently is and what is needed in terms of technical process. So welcome, Martin. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm just going to, here you are. It's Martin Smith from University of St Andrews. I'm in Dundee, which is quite close to St Andrews, and you can see we've got some maritime history behind me. That's actually in Dundee, my backdrop. Right, I'm just going to share my screen with you, which will take a second or two to find it. Right. Right, now can you all see that? I certainly hope so. Wait till we just put that on full screen. Right, very good. I wish I could be there with you this morning, but unfortunately I had an accident a couple of weeks ago. Recovering well, but I'm still not walking properly, unfortunately. I'd like to introduce you to the High Seas project. We're going to look at a bit of the technical side of this now. Hopefully it's not too technical for people. Right, so let's get stuck on in. First of all, who are the High Seas project? It's actually a program. This is the 3rd stage of it. But the current iteration, you can see we've got our, there's my pointer, here we are. We've got our Nordics up here. We've got France, Italy, Germany, and a number of UK players. I think many of them will be familiar to marine people, some perhaps not quite so much. Their role will become clear as we go through this, but this one is definitely a Nordic plus, and it's a cracking example of what we can do when we bring people from many different countries with many different expertises together. I should point out that Ballard, based in northern Denmark, and also Kongsberg Marine probably form the principal technical element. McPhee as well, France, Italy. But our Nordics are our main applied technical input, and they're just fantastic. I won't embarrass them further. Right, so we're connecting 9 European partner organisations across 7 countries. European Union's Horizon 2020 programme is how we're funded. We align with EU Green New Deal, Fit for 55, and similar national, supranational objectives and programmes, including some of those we've already heard about this morning. And we're seeking to make significant progress in eliminating, not reducing, but eliminating CO2 emissions from marine transport by developing the ability to employ green hydrogen as a fuel with fuel technology, but critically at commercial vessel scale, not boats, ships, steel. So we have done a lot of work. This program's been going on for over 10 years now. I'm going to talk about some of what we've been doing most recently. Can't cover everything we're doing, but I've got 3 topics for today. Developing the power system that we're actually going to use. Bit on both bespoke vessel design, fitting in with the power system, and on the environmental, social, techno-economic analysis, I'll cover a few bits on that. If you're wondering, I've got this written on the screen because I appreciate that not everyone will be able to hear me. Why don't we just rush out and build a ship? Well, building commercial vessels is very expensive. And it's potentially quite risky if we don't fully understand the power system, its weight, its physical footprint, particularly its performance, because we really want to know how much fuel it's going to use. How else could we know how to specify onboard fuel storage? So we construct, test, optimize the power system first, because that de-risks everything else. I'm delighted to be able to announce today, for the first time in public, successful construction of that power plant. It comprises 6 individual 100 kilowatt fuel cell modules, over 10 tons of lithium batteries. This is, full commercial scale power system. All support services, safety, it's been #1 for us throughout. We've got systems installed, tested, and all working nicely. Power in the system is restricted to 600 to 700 kilowatts, but we could actually deliver rather more if we unleash it a bit. Connected to real physical marine multi-drives, load banks, we're going to do full-scale system test, vessel duty cycle simulation, and then eventually system optimization. I'm going to show you data from this. What does it look like in a schematic sort of form? Well, port, starboard, obviously, 3 fuel cell modules per side, 2 large battery banks per side, output from those into multi-drives, and they would come down to thrusters. In this case, however, because we don't have an actual ship, power is going to a programmable load bank. That's what allows us to simulate as close as possible to reality the operations of an actual ship. That's better, less schematics. We can see what things really look like here. So this is a diagram of one of the fuel cell systems with the additional equipment required for marine operation. Down here, you can see 3 of them installed in a container. Now, that's just a regular waste paper bin up there, so that should give you some idea of the scale of this. They're rather compact, I think. Moving to the right here, this is a rather dull-looking picture of a blue container. It's very exciting, isn't it? No. But inside there's over 10 tons of lithium batteries. There's also cooling, which you can't see. Taking pictures inside isn't much more exciting. It's a bit dull, but these batteries are very important. Top right, we can see some people inspecting our hydrogen storage. We've got over 100 kilograms of hydrogen, which is rather a lot of hydrogen stored in this. It's open to the atmosphere, very good venting. All the system comes together in the operator station, safety, control, monitoring. Now, in this slide, I've also put up some of our safety planning work that we've done. These are diagrams, granted. This is on us doing hazard analysis by different zones where the stuff physically is. This then leads down into where we put the sensors for our alarm systems, and then ultimately to a panel, which is the monitoring control panel for safety, which the operator can bring up on the screen, emergency stops. We've done this just as you would do if you were developing an actual ship. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the system operating. This particular snapshot of one of the control panels, 3 fuel cells are operational. They're outputting about 60 kilowatts each. I think it's about 180, 85 kilowatts. In this case, we simply got them charging these batteries. Earlier, we charged the other batteries. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. I wasn't going to. If you look down here, you see we've got an efficiency figure, 51% fuel conversion efficiency. That will mean a lot to marine engineers on a system that's currently only putting out about 180 kilowatts. That's massive. We'll struggle to get anything close to that on any internal combustion engine at that scale, much bigger ones possible with heat recovery and whatnot. Now then, this is duty cycle performance testing. This is us only beginning to play with this. We've only had the system fully up and running in the last few weeks. We're simulating vessel on cruise here. Systems, we decided that would be about 350 kilowatts. Nice and smooth. It's doing exactly what we want to do. The spiky bits, that's turning the power up and down. That's maneuvers. We've got some peaks there of about 520 kilowatts, but we can go higher. What probably wasn't clear to you earlier is that the power system that we've developed is modular and scalable. We can add additional fuel cell banks to this, additional battery banks, or we could even reduce the size of it. This work isn't simply about enabling one vessel, power system for one vessel. By changing the power electronics, we can go up and down. So it's a fully scalable system. We're thinking far beyond our actual target vessel here. And in a few months' time, we should know how this works backwards. And we genuinely believe that this will be the system architecture which will be used by every other vessel that employs green hydrogen, certainly commercial ones. I don't believe anyone has ever actually shown this before or done it. It's long talked about, but you're looking on screen there at actual results of such a system in operation. Better talk a bit about our target vessel, but as I say, this power system itself is flexible. So, nice size vessel, definitely a ship, definitely commercial. It can carry 2 HGVs, Euro C, so double-skinned hull, etc. About 40 meters long, probably about 400 tons. The design is still developing, and it's developing all the time based on what we're learning from the power system work and also other bits and pieces that we're carrying out within the project. Carries about 120 passengers, 16 cars, doesn't have the 2 trucks on it. So it's a very common size of vessel in and around, certainly Scotland and the Baltic Nordic area. That's a rendering. To say this will change. The critical message on the type of vessel that we're targeting for this, specification capable of operating on 24 different routes around Scotland alone. You may have noticed from the outline specification above, it is a shallow draft. It can get into all sorts of ports, which is very important in some of our more isolated, remote communities. It can get into very shallow water. You may also have noted that we're thinking, for those that may not be familiar, these are Voigt propulsion units. So we're thinking that way now rather than azimuth and bow thrusters. Very flexible. You can turn the vessel on the spot, more or less, with those. Right, environment economics, full life cycle analysis models have been constructed. These are really complicated and not great for presentations like this. So all I'm going to do is pull out some of the headline results that I think people will be really interested in this morning. That's the one you really want to see, given what we're here to discuss. Now, we haven't got rid of all the carbon, as you can see on the plot on the right there, but we're including the embedded carbon, the materials that the vessel is made out of. So this is the glass, the plastics, the steel, obviously, the copper. It's an electric vessel, of course, and the materials that go into the batteries. So we can't eliminate carbon entirely, but wow, isn't that good? Now that's based on our estimated inputs, but the data we're now getting back from the plant testing and fuel consumption and such is confirming the input values we used. So this is looking pretty good, I think you'll agree. But we don't just look at carbon, we look at other environmental impacts as well. Now the green, which you can see here, is our vessel, and the other two are variants on fossil. Hope you can see that the green area is lesser than the other two colour areas, but we're noticing there are some issues, minerals, metals, etc. Now, the actual source of this is the supply chain. This is the mining, this is the extraction of the metals and such. And what this does is it tells us that our green vessel is certainly a lot greener than conventional fossil ones, but we need to keep an eye on our supply chain. And this is very much about the extraction of metals and other materials. So it tells us what we can focus on at a higher level in the background. It's important to know these things because we don't want to solve one problem only to create a whole lot of others. I think you'll agree.
Martin, thank you very much. And I'm really sorry that we're very short of time today, but I think your project's really fascinating and there's a lot more. We need a lot longer to go into this in more detail. But I think you finished your point there on saying that we don't want to go into any unintended consequences.
There is one more slide I must cover, Catherine.
I'm really sorry, but I have panelists and we have to stick to time on the pavilion. I do apologise, but maybe we could get your slides and we could circulate them and we can make things available. But I think there's a lot of detail in that project, which I'm sure everyone wants to know a lot more about if only we had more time. And we will make sure we circulate those slides. So, so I'd like to now move on to our panel. And whilst our panelists will bring with them specific knowledge in specific solutions, the objective of our next session is not about picking winners or on discussing which ones they are. It's going to be about identifying critical levers across potential transition pathways that are going to enable us to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. So I'd like to welcome our panelists to the stage. We have Wayne Jones from MAN Energy Solutions. We have Morten Bo Christensen from Maersk. We have Bernard Stormhigh from Yara, Kentaro Hosami from Mitsubishi, and Roel Honders from the IMO. So welcome to our panelists. Excuse me. My mic's not on? Is it? Okay, sorry. So I'd like to start by just asking each panelist very quickly to introduce themselves, their organization, and to just give me their key aspiration of COP. So I'll start with yourself.
So my name is Bernard Stormhigh. I'm VP Sustainability Governance in Yara, which is a Norwegian-based but global leading fertilizer company. Key aspiration for the entire COP, let's make it. Let's land the 1.5 degree scenario that we all need. And let's use this panel as part of how to get there.
Thank you. Roel.
Thank you, Catherine, and very good morning. My name is Roel Honders. I'm the head of air pollution and energy efficiency in the IMO Secretariat and responsible for all the regulatory discussions within the IMO on, of course, the implementation of IMO's initial strategy as well as MARP 1X6. From an IMO perspective and being part of the UN family, we recognize the urgency. COP has highlighted urgency, and we cannot wait actually to see that urgency also reflected in the discussions within the IMO, and we hope that the member states, the governments here, will bring that enthusiasm, the buzz to IMO, particularly in 2 weeks' time. Besides urgency, I think a just transition is very important, and also repeated over here in Glasgow, and also that just transition needs to come to the IMO.
Thank you. So Morten, your aspiration for COP?
Yeah, so my name is Morten. And now it's not working. Does this one work? Yeah. This one works, okay. All right. I'll try again. So my name is Morten Christensen. I represent AP Møller Mærsk, and I head up our decarbonization team. And yeah, I think I share what has been said here. I think the aspiration is that we will keep and strengthen the momentum that we are seeing, also in the private sector. That's obviously where I operate the most. I don't get to go to all the government negotiations, but we need to build the momentum, and companies need to realize that this is an urgency. And I think most can agree now on 2050. I think what we also need to realize is that this decade, something needs to happen. Right? We have to get moving, we have to get started, because otherwise it is too late. So I really hope to see this momentum building even stronger. Thanks.
Thank you. Wayne.
Hi, my name is Wayne Jones. I'm from MAN Energy Solutions. I'm a member of the executive board there. So my aspiration really is there's a lot of innovation, a lot of concepts. I think it's about implementation now, and we, being the largest engine manufacturer in the world, we have the technology to decarbonize the fuel. We've got many examples where we've done this, and I think now it's about action and supporting that action through legislation in our marine industry.
Thank you. And Kentaro.
Good morning. My name is Kentaro Ken Hosomi. I'm the Chief Regional Officer for the EMEA region of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Basically, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries started as a shipbuilding company, and we are also the founding partners of the Maersk Møller McKinsey Center of Excellence. And but actually, my background is on the energy side of the land use, land-based energy, like power systems and so on. And I see this as a very interesting, opportunity to merge such kind of expertise and knowledge of the land side as well as maritime industries in order to push the decarbonization globally forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to start by asking Wayne the first question. So what do you see are the key challenges that need to be overcome before 2030 in terms of the technology and the infrastructure?
Okay. Well, I think we all probably know we're playing catch up a little bit already, so we're already behind the curve in the terms of speed. So first of all, we need to think about the new vessels coming in, like AP Møller Mærsk recently ordered a series of vessels on methanol. And we have to understand there's not a perfect fix today, so we need to transition. And that transition is about LNG and then synthetic natural gas. We need to think about the ships that are already out there, so we need to retrofit the ship. These ships last 25 years plus. So there's a huge amount of coordination and activity bring together. But the clear message is the technology is available. We now need to get into implementation phase.
Great. And maybe I can bring Bernard in there, because as Yara, you're involved in a number of collaborative projects in the shipping industry, the No Gaps project being one of them. So maybe from your perspective, you could give some reflection on these technological challenges.
Yeah, so the No Gaps, the Nordic green ammonia powered ship, was a project set in place with experts from engine technology, from vessel design, for bunkering infrastructure, etc. And also the permits and licensing work, all coming together to see if we have what is needed in order to have the first green ammonia powered ships in place. And the project has identified that there are certainly a lot of necessary improvements to be done, but there's no real roadblocks in place stopping us from realizing the first ship that runs on green ammonia. So we are ready now to take a next step and move the collaboration into a detailed vessel design as the next step to take.
Thank you. That sounds very promising. So Morten, maybe I could bring you in and ask you, what part of the transition do you think can be driven by the industry itself, and what requires further cross-sectoral or public-private collaboration?
So I think in general we need to collaborate across the value chain, across the industry, with customers. But I think actually the one thing that will unlock this is actually demand. And I actually think the last year is a good example of that, because when there was demand, you engineered a bigger methanol engine, right?
Yeah.
When our customers, such as the one in the cargo owners for zero emission vessels, come out and say by 2040 we only want to buy zero emission shipping, that gives us confidence to go out and make long-term offtake agreements on the green fuels and so on. So I think the demand in the system, at the end of the day, it is us as consumers, right, who needs to put our wallets towards Maersk customers to make them actually. So I think that the demand can get us started and can get us going. For sure, to get all the way through, we need regulation, we need a carbon tax. It'll take a while, because that's just how these processes work. But we can get started on customer demand and also the different shippers and logistics players leaning in and investing a bit ahead of customers. And we're willing to do that, and I know others are willing as well. So there really is no excuse not to get going.
Great, thank you. Lots of optimism up here. Will, do you share that optimism when it comes to public-private collaboration?
Thanks, Casper. And let me start by saying that I'm very happy as the IMO to be here, surrounded by the private sector, really. Highlighting, of course, the importance of the cooperation between the public and the private sector. From an IMO perspective, from a regulator perspective, I think it's obvious that regulation drives innovation. And back in 2018, IMO adopted the initial greenhouse gas strategy in response to the Paris COP in 2015. We hope that now, I think this COP will give a very good drive and again kind of the confidence to regulators to start the discussions within the IMO on revising our initial strategy. In addition to, I think, what Morten was mentioning about demand, I think from an IMO perspective, confidence is a very important word, particularly when we speak about confidence among the governments that come to the IMO and that negotiate either this initial strategy or concrete measures. We need confidence, particularly in developing countries, that the transition is also for them a good transition, that they will not be penalized, that they will not fall behind what is happening in parts of the world as represented here today. So confidence among regulators around the world and the industry is very important in my perspective.
Great, that's a really good point, that a lot of these projects are going to build that confidence that is going to enable us to be able to accelerate and move at a quicker pace. Kentaro, could I seek your views on how to ensure we have an efficient cross-sectoral collaboration as well, and see what your opinion?
Yes, I very much appreciate that the maritime industry is moving ahead very quickly on alternative fuels rather than the fossil fuel which we are using right now. And this is also the same challenge we have on the land side. What kind of alternative fuel we need, especially for the so-called hard-to-abate industries, where lots of energy is consumed, but it's very difficult to electrify. So for these industries, the alternative fuel is also going to be a very big challenge, and I'm very glad that working together with companies like Maersk and MAN, that we are moving forward with the use of alternative fuels, and we're looking to see how we can learn from that on the land side as well, in order to reduce the carbon footprint from those kind of heavy industries.
Great, that's a really good point. So not only do we need collaboration at the public-private partnerships and collaboration across the shipping value chain, but collaboration with other sectors as well to be able to leverage the scale and acceleration and pace. So my next question, Morten Bo, as an early mover, how can early movers take on the largest risks and costs of transformation be protected from lower cost conventional fossil fueled competition?
Well, of course, again, a carbon tax would be very helpful in that context. But I do think, of course, when you move first, you do take upon yourself some more risk. Is it not? Is it working? Okay. And that's actually okay. And I think when you look across, whether it's shipping or other sectors, I think every company should just look to do the most they can. If you're a large company with a big balance sheet, you can do more than if you're a small company with a small balance sheet. So that's also why I think what you are seeing is that certainly in shipping, it is the container liners that are moving first, because they are the largest companies. They also have more plannable routes and so on. So the risk, I think there is risk, but so far it actually looks as if our customers are also willing to shoulder some of that risk. And again, that is what will get us started. But again, if we could level the playing field, it would also enable a just transition with all that money coming in. That really would be the best thing that could happen to the industry, for sure.
Great, thank you. Bernard, you'd like to comment on that?
I think we are operating a large number of ammonia plants around the world, and ammonia is one of those hard-to-abate industries. But then when we look upon the shipping industry and green ammonia as a fuel, we see that there is an opportunity for us to decarbonize and also help the shipping industry to decarbonize. But the tricky part is how to cover those costs. And there was a great report launched by BCG and World Economic Forum earlier this year called the Supply Chain Opportunity. And it looked at the cost of decarbonization across whole supply chains. So you can decarbonize, according to BCG, a pair of jeans by adding less than 2% to the value of the pair of jeans. And similarly, the food basket, it will cost you less than 4% to fully decarbonize the food basket. So the margins are higher at the tail end of these holistic supply chains, while the hard-to-abate industries typically operate at higher emissions but lower margins. So if we are able to evaluate that reduction of carbon throughout the whole value chain, the added cost to the consumers is not prohibitive.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Wayne, do you have anything else to add on this question about the risks?
I mean, we showed an example of batteries, and I just want to make sure that the public, we can't use batteries for everything. Some of the ships that Morten will use, these are propulsion systems of 70 megawatts, 70,000 kilowatts. Yeah, this is not going to be the solution. The fuel's the solution, and we have to accept that we'll need a transition. It won't be perfect. But let's reduce the CO2 emissions now by using LNG and then move into synthetic natural gas. And of course, we will also then launch in 2024 an ammonia engine, and maybe hydrogen, which is talked a lot about. That could be a solution, but only for part of the industry. And this is what we need to get realism into the equation as well. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's really, really good point. Maybe I could move back to this point of the just transition has come up a couple of times. Maybe I could ask Kentaro, how do we ensure that we have efficient transfer of knowledge and experience across different regions to be able to accelerate the transition and uptake of solutions?
Yes, one thing very unique to, I think, the maritime industry is that I think in order to globally decarbonize, I think the long haul voyage needs to also be decarbonized. In that sense, this bunkering of a point will be a very important issue in the future. It means that, for example, the Asian route now carries, I think, the most cargoes as a single route. And how to have the bunkering ports in those routes is going to be a very important issue if we think about globally decarbonizing. And in this context, I think the alternative fuel also has, this is what we are seeing is that it is the green fuel is cheaper when you produce it closer to the demand center. So it means that making the bunkering port and the production closer together will reduce the cost of the whole value chain.
Yeah.
So this point, I think, is necessary in considering how we globally decarbonize the industries.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point, and bringing in the shoreside infrastructure as well that is needed in order to fuel the vessels. Roel, maybe I could ask your perspective on transfer of knowledge. Obviously, that's something very important to the role of the IMO.
Absolutely, and I think here in Glasgow, what's clear is it's the responsibility of all of us to make sure that climate action, decarbonization in any of the sectors will not deepen the divide, the existing divide between developed and developing countries. And technology transfer has been mentioned here in Glasgow many times, and also for IMO this is becoming importantly or increasingly important. And we have already established quite a number of cooperation projects, mechanisms, bringing in the financial sectors to look into financing options in developing country. And the role of the industry is very important in this regard. And I think being here surrounded by the private sector, and again I also thank the Maersk Møller Center as well, it's an open invitation, I think, to think about and to join IMO in our, actually in upscaling our technology transfer efforts to, again, come back to this increase in confidence.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if that was clear.
Great.
Just to underline the invitation, I think, from the IMO side to think about how to work within an IMO cooperation framework on upscaling, technology transfer. And again, this can be, I think we have seen quite some ideas. We have heard experience with smaller vessels, with batteries, tapping into the potential of developing countries to provide and produce alternative fuels. And it is our joint responsibility to make that happen through technology transfer.
Great, thank you. And I think that's a really good introduction maybe to the concept of green corridors, which both Rike and Brian touched on in their keynote speech, and we'll hear more about on Transport Day later this week, which I hope everyone will be able to come to. But I'd just like to ask, to what extent do you think that regional green corridors can accelerate implementation and enable first movers? So maybe I'll ask Bernard for your thoughts on that first.
I think it's critically important that we get the first vessels out there that are operating on zero-emission technologies, and certainly green corridors can be a powerful lever to make that happen. Coming again from the green ammonia as a fuel perspective, we already have the rudimentary infrastructure in place because there is already an existing system for global trade of ammonia. And lots of these hubs are already located nearby existing ports such as Rotterdam and Singapore, etc. Gulf of Mexico, obviously. So I think we have a promising starting point, but we need to move forward a lot more faster in order to realize this.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to come in on the point around implementation and enabling first movers through green corridors? Morten?
Again, yeah, I mean, again, I think it's one of the many things we need to do. Yeah. And creating a green corridor, you know, that's a good platform also where you can then get the infrastructure to bunker the vessels and so on. And it'll hopefully accelerate things because, I mean, we need to, I mean, there's so many vessels out there. And but the good thing is that actually you can actually retrofit and you can actually get the bottleneck right now are the fuels, whether it is E or biomethanol, whether it is E or biomethane. Ammonia will come probably a bit later, but you can actually retrofit oil vessels to sail on methanol. LNG vessels can sail on e-methane, right? So it's just about stimulating the demand for these fuels, because if we can put in the demand, these projects will happen and the fuels will get out there. And I think the green corridors can be one good way of doing that. So we very much welcome that initiative.
Great, thank you. And I think we look forward to hearing more about that on Transport Day. I've just like to bring in Brian and Rike for a couple of questions. So maybe Brian, we can start with you and talk a bit about regulation and whether we can avoid regional regulation or whether we actually want to have regional regulation as well as obviously international, and how the two can interplay and stimulate first movers.
I think, Catherine, am I switched on? I think it's a little bit of a dilemma. I think if we wait for international regulation, we'll probably not do anything. I think it's really important to get on with it. We've talked a lot about collaboration. I think the key to this is getting groups of the willing collaborating together to try to get as consistent regulation as we can together, and which allows companies to innovate, allows first movers to adopt new technologies, and we may need to do a bit of a tidying act up over a decade or two, just converging that regulation together. I just don't think we can wait for a big bang of regulation all to come together in one go. I think this is about getting coalitions of the willing, working on things and finding immediate solutions.
Great, thank you. And Rikke, could Nordic and North Sea green corridors be a driver for implementation of green fuels at real scale?
Thank you, Catherine. I think actually, yes. Okay, like this? Okay, thank you, Catherine. Well, I think actually, yes, on a smaller scale, it can show that it's actually feasible to do it in real life, because it's a manageable sort of scope for doing this, and you can do bilateral agreements that can actually enhance the development. So I think, yes, definitely that in the Nordic, between the Nordic countries or in the Baltic Sea, that you have great potential for doing it real life demonstration.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So I think there's a lot of optimism here from our panel and from our keynote speakers on the fact that, you know, we need to have collaboration. We need to do these first mover projects. It's not about ruling anything out from a technology perspective at the moment, and maybe, you know, in the future that would converge and come together. But at the moment, it's about doing pilots and demonstrating technology and solution, and also the just and equitable piece of these pilot projects as well, and how we can start to build that in. So I just like to start to maybe wrap up a little bit and sort of ask our industry representatives here, so Kentaro, Wayne, Morten and Bernard, if you had one message that you would like to pass to the regulators that are here today, what would be the one thing that needs to happen in 2022 for the industry to reach zero carbon shipping by 2050? So who'd like to start?
Carbon tax, please.
Okay, you set the bar high for everyone there.
I might jump in with one item, and it's to make sure that regulation has both a stick and a carrot, and that these are moving in tandem. We see that our industry is being regulated and mandated to use green hydrogen through the Renewable Energy Directive, which would be perfectly fine if we knew we had a market for the more expensive products coming out. But then we see the EU regulating maritime fuel in such a way that this market comes probably 1 decade later than the use of green hydrogen. So bring the industry on board and make sure that the regulatory actions are coordinated and that this happens in tandem, so that you don't create such unintended gaps.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
I think I should probably nuance my answer just slightly. I think actually one very concrete thing that the IMO can do is there's this carbon intensity index being launched, which is, if that is implemented properly, will actually be very, very effective, and which will actually drive all the right behaviors. But right now it's very unclear how it will be implemented, how hard it will be implemented. I think if you can create some clarity around how that will be implemented, I think that will be a really, really good step, because at least the way we run the numbers and understand the numbers, that just drives all the right behaviors in the industry. So I think that's a very concrete thing and something, because you already had decided to do it, so it's just about how to implement that. And so that I think is, and then also please the other thing.
Wayne,
what was that again?
What would your one
I think I agree totally with Mo, and I think we need some clarity, and legislation will drive behaviour. And if we don't have the legislation, then the commercial models won't work, and then we'll just be sat here in 3, 4, 5 years' time, probably talking about the same things. And then the big wish as well, we're retrofitting around 15 ships a year to go to greener fuels. We need to do 100 ships a year if we're going to meet the target. So the saying behind you says we don't have time.
Yeah.
And for sure we don't have time. So somehow something's got to dramatically change now, not next year. And the only way you can do that, unfortunately, is legislation.
Great, thank you. And Kentaro, your message.
Anyway, for this movement to be sustainable, I think as the industry, we have to work on making it more affordable to the public. And in this sense, I think, the volume can bring the cost down. And in order to do so, I think the common use of infrastructures for marine use as well as land use, this is a very important part. This will play a very important part. So I would like to see the legislation give a single rule on managing such kind of infrastructures, not marine is this and not land is this. Something that will prevent us from getting the volume which we can make the move faster.
Great.
That is a point I would like to make.
That's a really good point. So lots of great points here. So the fact that we need that clarity and unambiguous goal from the legislator to sort of set that direction that hopefully then unlocks some of the demand from the market but also ensuring that we have synergies across maritime and land-based infrastructure directives and regulation as well.
Maybe just one thing to add is that please use science when making all the targets and also the taxes and so on, so that we consider all greenhouse gases and we do it along the value chain, right? And I think the extreme example is actually ammonia, because when you burn it on a ship, there are zero emissions on the ship. But if you use grey ammonia, you actually haven't solved anything, right? So we can't just push the emissions elsewhere, and we also need to consider other greenhouse gases and so on. So I think it's very, very important that also regulators acknowledge science and take a holistic approach to these targets and carbon taxes and what have you. So I think that's, because that's not always the case.
No.
And that is actually super important.
It is, thank you. So I think industries had their, yes, sorry.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for moderating a very interesting panel, and thank you to the panelists. My name's Gavin Allwright from the International Windship Association. I'm the Secretary General.
We can't hear without...
Okay, I'll speak up a bit.
Shall I?
Yeah. No problem. So my name's Gavin Allwright. I'm the Secretary General of the International Windship Association. And while green fuels are extremely important, I'm a little concerned that the audience here would go away with an impression that fuel is the only option that we have. We need to be taking a renewable energy approach to this. And if you bring wind propulsion into the center of this argument with operational changes and ship efficiency measures, and remember, wind is a propulsive energy force, we can actually reduce that total demand, that propulsive energy demand, 60-70%. Now, that makes the green fuel nut a much easier one to crack. Unfortunately, we see very little of this focus in the decarbonization pathways that are being proposed, and also industry. Actually, Yara is one of the forerunners in this, of actually engaging with wind, but we're not seeing enough engagement here. Even though we have nearly 1 million deadweight tons under wind assist at the moment, and another million, roughly 1 million, on the order books already. This is a solution for today. And I'd just like to hear the panel's take on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, who would like to answer that?
Yeah, I can go first. I think this is an excellent point that you're raising, and we do tend to get carried away talking about new fuels and retrofit on engines and so on. But you're absolutely right. A very, very significant part of the improvements in this decade must come from efficiency improvements. And it's good in two ways, because you have less emissions, and you use less of the more expensive fuel, right? So actually the business case for an efficiency retrofit when you run on green fuels is actually much better than if you run on oil from a financial perspective. So I think it's an excellent point you're raising, and wind is one of them, and there are many, air lubrication, but just using digital technology to optimize networks, network execution, and so on. There's so much in that toolbox still, and so we have not yet published our specific pathway towards the targets that we will set some shorter-term targets soon. But when we do, you will see that actually a quite significant part of getting to the targets that we set ourselves will be from efficiency metrics. So I think that's a very, very important point that you're raising there. So many thanks for that.
Yeah. Bernard, you wanted to come in on that as well?
Yeah, and thanks for making... am I on? Yeah. So thanks for making an excellent point, and it seems that you're already aware that we as Yara, we have bought a company that provides wind supporting system for vessels. And it's also important that we tailor the solutions according to the circumstances. We have also built a zero-emission battery-operated container vessel that is going to operate autonomously, but this is a short-distance coastal operation, so that wouldn't have been possible for deep-sea vessels. So we need to tailor the solutions according to the requirements of each part of this of the operation.
Great. Thank you. Now, I just had one final question, because I gave the industry the opportunity to ask of the regulators, but I'd like to give that opportunity back. And so to say to Roel, Brian, and Rikke, if there's one message you want to pass on to industry, what would that be?
Be nice.
Who would like to go first? Of course.
Market interventions defined.
Oh, yeah, there's no sound.
If we could get those market interventions defined, everything else would come right. The technology's all there, solutions are all there. We tend to get at these forums the people who are early adopters and are quite enthused by it. There's still a lot of people to bring on board within the shipping sector as a whole, and whilst I am optimistic, I think that sector needs to really see laid out ahead of it what the market-based measures are going to look like. In the absence of those, we must get on with green corridors, but the sooner we can get all the market-based measures defined, the sooner this will get straightened out.
Great, thank you.
Well, actually, well, I agree with what you're saying, but one message perhaps is that we don't need to go from 0 to 100 at once. And I think the points made by the gentleman back here was really good, because, I mean, you're first movers, all of you, and all the rest are not. And they can get started by just doing a little bit on each of their ships, and then we'll make progress. And I think that is actually the key message. You all need to do something. You don't need to do a lot, but you need to do something.
Thank you. And Roel, final word to you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I've heard many good ideas. I think and I mentioned it before, confidence. And we've talked about corridors, we've talked about certain consortia. That experience needs to come to the IMO in one way or another, in order to bring those member states, the industry in those member states that are currently sitting on the fence, to move forward. And I hope that when we discuss corridors, that this is not just limited to certain, Northwest Europe, Japan, certain regions in Asia, but this is eventually also brought back into the IMO to share the experience. And I heard people talking about carrots and sticks, and I fully agree that incentivizing first movers is very important. But talking about sticks at this point, when we actually want to get traction and we're going to want to get all governments within the IMO off the fence and move forward, I think it's not just the right time yet to talk about sticks, but I think doing things gradually, understanding that there will be first movers, but passing the message that everyone needs to do something is probably a more sensible way forward to gradually move up the global level playing field.
Great, thank you very much. And I think that's really nice comment to end on, that everyone has a part to play and we need to take everyone with us on this journey and leave no one behind. So thank you very much to my panelists, and I would like to thank them and bring in Bo Simonson from the Mercer McKinney Muller Centre so we can have the final wrap up. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Is this one on? Wait. Put it a little bit down.
I've no idea.
All right. Can you hear me?
No.
Maybe I just...
No,
it's on? Oh, it's on?
Sort of reflect on what you've just heard from the panel and to sort of see how this resonates with the findings of your recently launched industrial transition strategy. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katharina, and thank you everybody, and especially thanks to the participants of this panel. I thought that the perspectives that were brought forward now, the nuances and the texture that was brought to this conversation was absolutely tremendous. And the first thing that strikes me when I listen to you now is that we have leaders here from public sector and from private sector that really know what they're talking about, and you are bringing this forward with great confidence, actually, that we can move the needle now. So I think that was the first takeaway from me, so thank you very much for that. And then to say a few words about what I learned, and I'll try not to confuse, because actually I think you made a very clear set of statements here at the end. But we talked during the presentation here about objectives and boundary conditions to this transition first. And I thought it was really reassuring to hear how we are now all talking about net zero in 2050. We're talking also about intermediate targets, which I believe will come strongly onto the agenda soon as well. We are talking about the holistic perspective, seeing shipping in the context of a global transition, also including the social elements of this transition. So this is of course extremely important, that we take the right scientific, holistic approach to assessing what we are actually doing, so we can do the right things and not fool ourselves. So that's really the first thing. And then secondly, this the just element has got to come very strongly into how we drive this forward now, and I'm sure it will. Then we talked about the how, or you talked about the how, both on the short term, which I believe is like 0 to 5 years, and then the longer term. And I thought it was extremely reassuring, first of all, to get confirmation from both public side and private side that public and private need to collaborate. It's really the only way. So the journey we are on now on establishing coalitions, I can say from our center as well, we feel this very strongly, that we have both from government side and from private side a lot of entities joining to collaborate to understand these pathways. I thought you all brought that forward in different ways, and that's really a key point here. Then on the shorter term also, how do we get going? We heard that it is possible to get going. Everybody can do something. So we all have to look ourselves in the mirror and talk to our customers and our suppliers and our employees. Whether you are a huge company or whether you're a small company, everybody can actually do something here. So this is very important. We talked about energy efficiency and harvesting the low-hanging fruits of energy efficiency, which is for sure something that all operating companies can do. Even if they are quite mature, there are some big opportunities there. We heard also that regulation is not necessarily only carbon pricing for the entire world. There's actually a lot of policy and regulation that can support these first movers in getting going, establishing green corridors. I believe there'll be some public funding, probably some exemptions, some regulatory flexibility and all of that. And that needs to be designed again between the public and the private sectors. So here we are seeing the first signs of some really concrete initiatives to get going. And as we said, and I like very much what you said here from the IMO perspective, that these initial movements, they will inform and inspire the developments on the global regulatory scene as well. So this is just extremely important that we get going, even if at small scale. I also thought the very technical presentation we saw by Martin at the beginning is very important to bring forward here, because we talk a lot about the huge global developments, but actually we shouldn't forget that there are a lot of small steps that need to be taken. So also these kinds of developments, where we're demonstrating even in small scale that we can decarbonize shipping, are going to be critical steps to really get to that long-term goal. And then finally we talked about the long term, and I think we all agree that the scale of the green fuels need to accelerate on an exponential scale. So this is extremely important that we all support those developments, and at the same time that the cost of these green fuels need to come down by scaling, by innovation, by improving, as I think we've seen in many other industries as well, to get these learning curves going. Of course, also in the longer term, we will need to get to a global carbon pricing mechanisms. I think everybody is confirming that today, so that we need to keep that end goal in mind. But we also, I think, had confirmation here that it's okay that there will be global regulation and some intermediate steps in between. We shouldn't let perfect be the enemy of good here. So let's just get going. So I think to round this up, I'd just like to say once again that at the end of the day, of course, it's about technology, it's about economy, it's about energy. But to get going, it is first of all about leadership. And leadership is about individuals, it's about people who dare to step ahead of the crowd, to radiate confidence about the steps we are taking. And I must say, I think all our panelists today were doing exactly that. So I'd just like to thank you all for coming, and let's continue this journey of creating the confidence, sharing between us, being open-minded, and push a very complex development in a huge ecosystem reaching way beyond the companies and the countries represented here, way beyond. So we are humble to it, but we are on the right track by driving this forward. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bo. Thank you for that. Was a really good summary. I've done my job, so I don't need to wrap up. So I know we're on time with this our time, but I don't know if we've got time for a couple of questions from the floor, maybe. Because I'm sure there's people who want to ask questions, and we did start a little bit late. So. But if we could just maybe see if there's any quick questions from the floor for any of the speakers here today. No. That's fine then.
Yeah.
We've finished on time. So I would just like to thank all my panelists, keynote speakers, Martin joining us remotely, the organisers, Mercer McKinney-Muller Centre for organising this, and of course our hosts, the Nordic Council of Ministers. So thank you very much for joining us today. A recording will be made available, and we'll also put a shorter version on the Nordic Talks podcast. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.